Hi, this is Dark Journalist. Today I have the exciting follow-up to my in-depth conversation with former Assistant Housing Secretary Catherine Austin Fitts. Now, in Part 1, Catherine walked us through the perils of a constitutional convention. In Part 2, she'll go even deeper and show us how trillions of dollars are missing from major federal agencies. Now, Catherine has outlined the amazing fact that we're looking at two civilizations operating side by side, and that the missing money from HUD and the DoD represents a harvesting operation on a major scale. But will this entire game end in a shadow space economy? Let's go ask former Assistant Housing Secretary Catherine Austin Fitts.
The people who run the world believe in slavery. Slavery is very, very profitable. They believe in it, and they have many, many ways of making slavery look like something else.
The Dark Journalist exclusive interview. The Bitcoin Op, Digital Slavery and the Space Economy. An in-depth two-part episode with former Assistant Secretary of Housing, Catherine Austin Fitts. Now, let's go join Dark Journalist Daniel Liszt.
Catherine, it's great to have you back for Part 2 of our deep discussion on the missing trillions. Now, I wanted to start off here with a theme that you return to often, which is this kind of high-tech slavery theme. And you often remind us of a filmmaker turned political activist Aaron Russo and his unusually revealing conversation with Nicholas Rockefeller.
Yeah, what Aaron described was what he had been told was that where we want to go, our goal here is to get everybody chipped and to have a digital cash system. And then if people don't do what they're told, they can have their money turned off.
Right.
And it's basically another way of describing getting everybody on dependent on a centrally controlled universal basic income. Mm-hmm. So they're basically what you've been doing with the different games and subsidies is trying to make sure they can't start and run their own businesses. They can't start and run their own, things that generate, whether it's create your own currency, create your own local stock markets, build your businesses so you don't need to buy from the central authority or need anything. And part of that is keeping people on such a hamster wheel of taxes and fines and other monies they need to pay. It's fees. We're getting feed to death. So you want to keep them hooked into the central system, and you want to do it digitally because that's so cost effective and it gives you total control. And so we see on Equifax, the moral of the story is not to fire Equifax or tell Equifax to get its act together. The idea is the Social Security system doesn't work, and so the White House says, "Oh, let's put the Social Security numbers on blockchain." So they can coordinate so well with cryptocurrencies, and then Zuckerberg's out there saying
Zuckerberg from Facebook.
Right. Facebook's out there saying universal basic income. And you see the different pieces of what Aaron was saying. Because you're talking about total control. And not only total control, but total control where you can have everything done by relational database and software. So you just say, people are required to do ABC. And if they don't, these sanctions, financial sanctions are put on them. And, then there's the nuclear option. They just get cut off and have to starve to death. And so, and it's all there and the AI can manage it and you just don't have to be bothered.
Wow. Well, this is a major step, and I think we really are close, certainly closing in to adopting the digital cash. It's definitely undesirable, but it's close.
Well, here's what makes us close, and here's why we don't have to be close. You've got all sorts of conceptual economic arguments why this makes sense, which once you dig in and you look at the bailouts and the missing money and what's really going on in the money are a bunch of BS. Okay? Total BS. Sounds great. You've got, so we don't have to be close that way. But the other thing is you're trying to communicate a change in the culture that will make it socially acceptable to do this.
Right.
So, people should be able to free and be artists or do what they want, and this is a terrible thing. We shouldn't make people work. You've got all sorts of spin as to why this is good. Because remember, you have to make slavery look good.
Yes.
You have to make slavery socially acceptable. So you've got all these various spins going on, and you will hear exceptionally intelligent, very good-hearted people saying the most completely insane things. It's as though they can't connect to what that really means in terms of their basic property rights, their basic individual rights, their basic human sovereignty, and even a human society. I mean, we had a proposal of legislation put in one of the New England states saying, that basically the system, when you died, the system owned your organs unless you opted out.
It's unbelievable.
So now we're literally talking about whether your body is your own or not.
Yeah, there's no question that this was a direction that's seriously being pushed. So on one side, you have this transhumanism rising, and on the other, the demand for more and more personal data, especially health data.
I mean, it's very interesting because when Obamacare went forward, I said to my clients, do not let your data get digitized. Do not. During the litigation, I would go to doctors and I said, look, if you're going to keep a digital record, I'm out of here. You do not have my permission to keep a digital record of this. So, but you put your kids' data in a digital database, and then they've got the information they need to know where the organs are they need.
Fascinating.
Well, here's, I've said this to you before, and I've said it many times on public radio, and in an open forum. The people who run the world believe in slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Slavery is very, very profitable. They believe in it, and they have many, many ways of making slavery look like something else or feel like something else. But if I get a control file on you and I get you over a barrel, you're a slave.
Right.
Now you may call, well, no, I'm just a guy with a control file. Well, there are gradations all the way, from here to Spartacus. But the reality is these folks believe in slavery. The last time they canceled slavery, I mean, slavery today is much greater than it was when the African slave trade was at its height globally. But, if you look at the reasons they canceled the overt support of slavery when they did, those reasons are now going away. And if we let the tech guys complete their vision, we're going back to slavery. And I think that's what the bankers want. And I believe every word Aaron said. And I believe he was describing what is true. That is the goal. So now, if you look at the reasons why that group wants this kind of, traditionally they are very afraid of the general population and they have deep distrust in the general population. And what the general population needs to understand and accept is that they have very legitimate reasons to be afraid. And the general population, the corruption in the general population is as bad as it is in the elites. Mm-hmm. This is not a, we're good, they're bad. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So that's why I think it's absolutely imperative, not for everyone, but the 5 to 10% in the general population who are interested and have the wherewithal and skills to do it. It's up to us to come up with a way through this which addresses their legitimate concerns, but arrives us at a more human civilization, whether it's 2.0 to 3.0 or finding a replacement to the central banking warfare model of running the financial system. What we need is a way to get from here to there and end up in a civilization that's very human.
Right.
Now, my question for you and your other guests is, does that mean we all have to go to Mars?
Well, it's the inevitable question. Now, you produced an incredible report, a Solari report, on the space economy about 2 years ago. And this thing was remarkable. The headlines are still catching up with the detail that's in there, and I recommend everyone try to find that because it's really eye-opening. But I also recall you saying that when you were producing this report, you encountered an incredible amount of interference.
Oh, God. In the production process, there were, 20 or 30 amazing, mysterious things. The printer suddenly broke down and couldn't be repaired and that's a 2-week delay. Oh, no, went on and on and on. I've never had so many mysterious interventions ever as when I did that. It was funny, I finished it. I was up in Rhode Island working with a wrap-up editor, and I was like on the 26th floor of this big hotel. And I started to record very late at night when I'd finished everything. The web presentation was done. And it had taken me weeks to really get down to what I believed was the essence of the story here. And that was that our goal as a society was to become a multiplanetary civilization. And the reason we had proceeded with such radical globalization as fast as we did was so that we could achieve becoming a multiplanetary civilization. And then for the first time in my life, the whole process of what had happened with the Uruguay round of GATT and globalization made sense.
Mm-hmm.
It had never made sense before. And suddenly it was like, oh, now because I like to look at things from Mr. Global's point of view to understand why what's happening. Anyway, so I sit down to record, and Daniel, I'm so excited because this has been, years and now months and now weeks of getting to the point where I can sit down and write a coherent story of what's going on and why. So I'm so excited. I sit down to record it, and suddenly, right outside the window, there is a noise that is like no noise I've ever heard before or since in my life.
Oh.
And it is so eerie and otherworldly, and it is loud.
Whoa.
So, I'm pretty fearless, but and I had the curtains closed because it was late at night. I said, okay, I can do this. And I walk up and I throw the drapes back, and there's nothing there.
That's so strange. What did it sound like?
It sounded like a deep foghorn, but not like a foghorn because it was so, it was an alien sound. It was not a sound I've ever heard before. And it was so weird. It just sent chills down, and it was loud. I mean, it just encompassed the whole room. And of course, at 3 a.m. in the morning, there's nobody you can turn to and say, did you just hear that? So I sit back down to record, and I start to record, and then I stopped after about 3 minutes, and I said, wait a minute. I'm really freaked out by this. So I got back and I played it again, and I sounded totally freaked. The sound of what I sounded like before the sound and after the sound is like this. The first person you want to listen to, the second person you want to say, get that person a whiskey. I'm freaked. So I said, something, I need to take a break. So now it's going to be forever to do this. So I take a break anyway. So I take a break. I have a cup of coffee. Everything's fine. I record. Okay. So, but this goes on because then we have to make the hard copy. So we go through the printer thing. Finally, after so many, and my team is wonderful. The Solari team is wonderful because they are stars at spiritual warfare, and every time something happens, they say, welcome to Solari world. Anyway, so finally, the books are shipped from the printer on the West Coast, and it's very expensive to ship them all FedEx. So the first 50 that were urgent to get out, they shipped by FedEx, and then the rest came by ground. So it's supposed to come the next day. It doesn't come. And then the next day it doesn't come. And we can't find it in the tracking. It doesn't come in. FedEx is usually reliable. Well, 19 days later, the box shows up back in California with 34 books gone.
Wow.
And I said, it's funny. I said to our wonderful guy who does the graphical treatments, I said, well, here's what's funny. They were always happy with the PDF, but I think they liked this one so much they wanted hard copies.
Right. They really wanted it.
And I said, don't be upset. This is the ultimate compliment.
Yeah.
34 is a lot of books. They wanted to spread it around. Yeah. So here's my question to you, Daniel. Who were the 34 people who got copies? Who was on that distribution list?
Well, it really makes you wonder. I could take a pretty good guess.
Right.
But it is serious interference.
Shadow work.
Oh, yeah.
It's not, here's the thing. Most of the shadow work that I deal with is, I believe, is not the government. I believe it's the corporate media.
Okay.
So, if you look at how much market share the independent media has taken from the corporate media, it's significant. And I think a lot of the hacking and other software problems is their competition back.
It makes a lot of sense to me. It doesn't add up there to just be the government, sure. I mean, contractors are a factor, I would say, if there's surveillance from the government, because they act outside of government rules. But the press really doesn't have to observe any rules if they just have a program to take you down.
I think you have publicly traded companies, whether it's social media, corporate media, the communications companies, and they're all part of running a fake news loop. And they make a lot of money from it, both in Washington with the rules and regulations and just providing the services. And they don't want their market share messed with. And if you look at how much they fight, if I've got a stock that's trading at a PE of, 20, let alone Amazon's PE, but if I've got a stock that's trading at 20 and I lose $1 of income, my stock goes down $20. So that's major leverage. And the pressure on those guys, to get one more dollar is heavy. So every dollar you take away is pretty significant. And if you look at what social media has taken away from corporate media, it's significant.
Well, this is the issue, and I think you've nailed it there. The corporate media is incensed at the rise of the independent media, and that's why they've landed most of these fake news style attacks. They're certainly bankrupt in the ethics department, and the public is catching on. It's a long process. Now, I know we're going to go deep into your thoughts on Bitcoin, and there's a lot to say there. You have a fantastic article called Bitcoin the Op up at Solari, and you've resisted a lot of hype around this cryptocurrency.
I don't know if you heard this. I just saw a presentation by an activist when I was out in Aspen at the cryptocurrency conference.
Mm-hmm.
That was the most appalling, amazing presentation I've ever seen.
Wow.
So basically I can't figure out if this guy is, sort of much more stupid than he seems, or he's basically a professional economic hitman. I don't know what the story is. But he gave a presentation, and here's his plan. He's running for president, all on anonymously laundered Bitcoin money.
Unbelievable.
You've got all these people running around the country in RVs on Bitcoin profits.
Wow.
But it's all anonymous. I don't know where my money's coming from.
Right. Wow.
Right. So here's a guy. He's driving around the country in an RV. He's being financed anonymously with Bitcoin. He says he's running for president, although you're not allowed to have anonymous donations if you're running for president. So I'm not quite sure how that will work out. But here's his platform. Your first day in government, what you do by executive order is you shut down the federal government. So 50% of the household incomes in your county and 3,100 counties in America stops.
Huh.
Military pensions, Social Security disability, welfares, food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, all the businesses that feed off of it. Walmart's out of business. They're gone. They're toast. So think of all the insurance programs, all the pensions that own insured mortgages, all of that stops. So you've got the pension funds wrecked, you've got the you've got the household incomes wrecked, you've got all the businesses that feed off consumers wrecked. You're talking about the stock market down 90%. I mean, it's going to be fun. So you just stop the federal government on the theory it's old, you can't fix it, let's just implode it because we're young and hip and groovy. And then what you do is you take the remaining assets like the national park, all the military equipment, all the precious resources, those strategic oil reserves. And now that you've imploded the economy and everybody's desperate, ready for this?
Yeah.
You auction it off to the highest bidder.
Oh.
So Goldman Sachs gets to buy everything imagine buying, let's say we auctioned off all the federal lands today and they went off for a price of X. Goldman Sachs gets to buy everything for 1% of X.
Amazing.
So I stood up and I said to the guy, it's very interesting you should propose this because this is exactly what the U.S. intelligence agencies did in Russia. It's called The Rape of Russia. And Ann Williamson, writing for the Wall Street Journal, documented and wrote it all up, gave congressional testimony. There are 2 Solari reports on the rape of Russia with Ann Williamson. You can hear all about it. And I said, it's estimated that their population dropped 10 to 25 million people because that's how many died or had to leave so that they didn't starve.
Amazing.
Now, what I didn't mention is, they teamed up with the Russian mafia and sucked all the money out of the pension funds and out of the banks because you have total chaos, right? You implode 50%. So here's what it means. So let's take your county. 50% of the people are directly or indirectly, because a lot of them work for tech companies that have government contracts and defense contractors and, all these companies directly or indirectly, their money's coming out of the federal budget. All that stops. Okay. So 50% of the people in your neighborhood, let's say they have 1 to 3 weeks of food and they have 1 to 3 weeks of money that can buy food. So that gives them 2 to 6 weeks, and figure they can go 1 to 3 weeks without food and stay alive. So that gives them 3 to 9 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did they do then? So his explanation was, and he said in the process, we tear up the Constitution.
Oh, yeah.
It's good because then Goldman Sachs has plenty of money with which to buy the federal lands because they get to keep the 20, they or whomever gets to keep the $21 trillion. I'm picking on Goldman because I used to work there. Anyway, so this was the plan, and he basically said the Constitution is old, and the U.S. government can't be fixed, so we just need to implode it and move on. And you can't get the $21 trillion back. It's too hard. And this way, everybody can just live their lives and get what they want, and everything will be wonderful because we can be happy.
Amazing.
I sat in the main auditorium of the Aspen Institute, and I listened to this. Now, I had just come from the Koch brothers building where I was at a panel in the Booz Allen Hamilton room. And then I come over to the main auditorium and listen to this guy basically lay out the rape of Russia does the United States. And I'm thinking, but he's running around the country with money laundered anonymously through Bitcoin doing this.
Well, the deep state can finance him, and he can be their tool without even signing on. That's pretty good. Now, I know at the end of 2017, you and I are going to do a deep episode on the financial picture, and that will include these wild swings that keep happening. For this one, I want you to help us understand why the cryptocurrencies are something you see as flawed or even unsafe. How do you, with all of your financial experience, see this?
It was very interesting. I tried for many years to really understand blockchain and cryptocurrencies.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of get a certain distance, and then I tear my hair out and say, I'm busy on something else. And finally, earlier this year, the guys at Nexus asked me if I'd come up to this conference, and I said, I've got to finish doing due diligence, and I'm getting a lot of questions from clients. And I'm very uncomfortable with what I've learned so far, but I've got to finish my due diligence. Now, I called one of my dearest friends in the world who is absolutely brilliant. He's got a PhD from MIT. He's the smartest guy I know. And I said, you got to help me finish this. So we've got to figure out cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and blockchain together. And so we spent about 6 weeks, and we would do these Skype dates where we'd get on Skype and learn and talk and find the best stuff and videos. And finally, of course, it got down to the fact that there are several what I call secret decoder rings that make the hashing function and the privacy work. And the question is, can you backdoor this either through the keystroke technology, the transaction process, or, the secret decoder rings? And I got stuck because I couldn't find somebody I trusted who's a real leading expert on the crypto side to really help me figure it out. And I said, if a financial product takes 100 hours to due diligence and someone like me still can't satisfy myself that there's no backdoor, there's a problem, because one of the standards in the financial markets is a reasonably diligent, intelligent person should be able to do a complete due diligence.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the question. How do I? Well, anyway, I started making appointments with people who do know, who are leading thinkers in security. Anyway, and so I hope to finish that due diligence. But anyway, so I get up to the Nexus conference, and what I discover is the people there don't think it's trustworthy either.
Wow. Okay.
Right. They're trying to see if they can make it better. Now, part of the problem is if you look at the current economics of blockchain and Bitcoin, and the current sort of logistical issues, it doesn't yet scale. But I think most people think they can innovate their way into scaling. Now, if you're going to have a digital global currency, one or more, you need these guys to be running around figuring everything they're figuring. And the fastest way to get them to all figure it out is to pump the market.
Right.
Now, here's the thing. The ownership of Bitcoin is very consolidated. And it's a very thin market compared to the securities markets or the fixed income market and the equity market. If you look at how important it is for the central bankers to keep people out of gold, out of land, out of anything that would signal hyperinflation, anything that would turn on the smoke alarm for the general population, or frankly compete with them because they're trying to always buy more. This is wonderful because you're sucking a huge amount of money. This is just like the gold ETF. It's sucking huge amounts of money out of the physical gold market. The central bankers and the leadership are in heaven. That's great. But the other thing is you're sucking it into something that they're inventing what you need. And so, the fastest way to get them to do it is you just pump the bejesus. And if you think the people who manage the stock market and the and fixed income market and the derivatives market can't pump a tiny little thin market like this, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a pump.
Okay, so it's a pump, but is it a pipe dream?
Well, it's not a pipe dream in the sense that, first of all, if somebody told me Max Kaiser said the price was going to go to 100,000. McAfee, he gave a great presentation called Pandora's Box on security. He's a big miner. He's saying it could go as high as 500,000. So, if they want to run this thing globally using smartphones and entrainment, they can take this price much, much higher.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for people who are desperate to make any kind of money, this is sweet because suddenly they're getting a rush of capital gains. Next week, I should point out, we're putting up one of the law firms I work with on the West Coast is I commissioned to write an article on the U.S. tax treatment. Because one of the things that scares me, I think 90% of the people currently in the Bitcoin market have a control file.
Interesting.
Because, their image of what their tax treatments are and their regulatory treatments are far different than the actual one. Now, remember, under the Constitution, no one is allowed to coin a currency other than the Treasury. Forget that they've delegated that role to the Fed for a minute, but one of the reasons the IRS has taken the position that digital currency is not currency, it's property. And that's because I think they don't want to, if you want everybody to run around and prototype this for you, you can't declare it a currency. You have to declare it something else. Otherwise, you're in massive violation of the Constitution. And the reality is, Daniel, there is huge demand for local place-based currencies, and anybody who tries to do one, gets the bees coming down on their head like that, squashed like a bug. So,
absolutely.
One of the most telling things about Bitcoin, the op, is virtual currencies are free to fly and innovate and operate outside the regulations. There's a lot of winking and nodding by the regulators right now, but place-based currencies can't get to first base, and it tells you something. Because all political power starts, bottom up through place.
Right.
Anyway, there's a very detailed commentary up at Solari that is free to the public. There's a little video at the top. It's called Special Solari Report, Bitcoin the Op with Harry Blazer. It's excellent. And if you really, we were there together and literally unpacked, I think, pretty much sort of what the op is. So I think you're looking at a huge pump and dump. Now, if I could suggest to the people listening to this any book that you should read to understand what's about to happen, it's called The Master Switch by Tim Wu. Have you heard of it?
Yes, you recommended it. Interesting stuff.
Right. So what Tim Wu does is he goes back. The subtitle is The Rise and Fall of Information Empires. And he goes back, telegraph, telephone, TV, and he shows you how a new technology, information technology happens. Bam! There's this huge period of innovation. People try, entrepreneurs get a hold of it. They have all sorts of exciting ideas of how this is going to change the world. The technology gets figured out, and then wham, suddenly it centralizes. So it's one, or it's the duopoly, the McDonald's and Burger King. And, then a new technology and everybody gets excited and then wham. And what you realize is, oh, it's much cheaper and easier to just have this period of innovation. You figure it out and then you use it to centralize.
Right.
And so it's a history of progressive centralization. And each time, it's funny, in 1997, I was out at Esther Dyson's conference, with all the Silicon Valley luminaries, and everybody was so sure that this technology was going to change the world and make us free and da-da-da-da. And sure enough, they got pumped and dumped and wham, centralized. And when I was out at Nexus, it was like, I've been to this movie before. Here it is again. This is, Esther Dyson in the desert 3.0, it's going to make us free. And I kept saying to people, look, you cannot solve a political problem with a financial product.
Right.
So we have a governance system that doesn't have integrity. Within the governance system, we have a financial system that is losing integrity, doesn't have integrity. And we've added on information systems that don't have integrity. And to think that we're going to introduce a financial product on the information systems that don't have integrity within a financial system that doesn't have integrity and within a governance system that's going to have integrity, and that's going to change our integrity problem, you're dreaming. Especially because if you look at how the governance system and the financial system enforce, they enforce with force. And force is analog. It's not digital. Mm-hmm. So if you have your Bitcoin on your special secret decoder, hard wallet offline, and the feds walk in with a subpoena and guns, pointing at your kids and children and wife or husband, and they say, give me your private key or you're going to prison for the rest of your life, what are you going to do?
They're going to get it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really funny because when they came at me, when they landed on my head, seized the office, everything else, it was all the techie guys who got scared and ran first.
Wow. Yeah, exactly.
So
it is interesting because they're trying to set up this idea that Bitcoin is a new democratization of monetary, digital money, and it'll create this whole renaissance. It'll be like a worldwide global thing where people can exchange and forget about governments, and what you're saying is it's actually a tremendous tool for the opposite.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's absolutely a centralizer. You have to listen to Bitcoin the app because it's a much deeper, longer story.
Yeah.
But what's wonderful is you have people running around marketing the Intel agency implosion plan all around the country, and they're having, they're receiving donations anonymously through Bitcoin. I mean, how perfect is that? Mm-hmm. Right. So.
Well, it certainly is a slick maneuver and kind of like a Trojan horse, promising one thing and delivering something quite different. And when we come back, we'll take a look at who or what is behind this push for more centralized control that we've seen in everything from the media to the financial world. Might Lockheed Martin be appearing on our radar here? We've got former Assistant Secretary of HUD and Solari report publisher Catherine Austin Fitts here. I'm Dark Journalist. Stay with us.
Subscribe to Dark Journalist now and save. Rates are going up for 2018, but you can keep the 2017 discount rate of just $39 for one full year by becoming a member before December 31st at darkjournalist.com. Get all the inside access at last year's special price and support the search for truth. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter to stay updated on the latest shows. See you there.
And we are back. This is Dark Journalist, and I'm speaking with Solari report publisher Catherine Austin Fitts. Now, Catherine's latest report, called Control 101, along with her most recent one before that, Enforce the Constitution, give us in staggering detail a head start on the financial and social conditions that really drive our world. I kid Catherine a lot by calling it Solari University because you're going to learn a lot. My estimate is that the reports are about 2 to 3 years ahead of the headlines on average, and that's the crucial edge that we need. Now, Catherine, I wanted to ask you about the media carnage that we've been seeing with them chasing after Trump and the fake Russia scandal. Is that a system now that is just eating itself alive?
The Russian hoax has failed completely. I mean, it's becoming, it's not only becoming stale, but it's becoming pathetic. And it's very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous, and it's so pathetic. And I think what you're watching in both the Las Vegas and Weinstein situation is you may be watching some of the deep state people say, okay, we got to clean all these 2.0 guys because they're playing dirty. They're not playing big boy pants, and we just don't have the time or money to deal with this. The margins are shrinking. We need to make sure we get the dividend, and get things. So I think you're seeing some pushback, and that pushback is much less, it's much more operational than philosophic. We don't have time for your egos.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've got a president who's playing ego par excellence. So, but I just think, again, when the re-engineerings happen, which they have to happen going from 2.0 to 3.0, a lot of these big ego guys are going to get cut.
Well, what has really been weird for me watching these media rollouts of the Get Trump stories is that they're almost daily having to retract their stories because they rush the attacks out without checking the facts. I'm also intrigued that they've simply fallen in love with their version of the term deep state, which, as you know, is the incredible shrinking definition of a powerful term that was coined by Professor Peter Dale Scott over at Berkeley to describe powers that are working in the shadows. So, their attempts to minimalize it I find very fascinating. I mean, have you felt that they're just hitting an all-time low in reporting now?
I don't know. I never watch them. Occasionally I'll get somebody will send me a video from YouTube of my favorite one. It's up if you come into our web presentation for the second quarter and third quarter wrap up. Mm-hmm. So we have the news, trends, and stories. One of the sections in each wrap up is we do a review of the top trends and stories for the quarter. So if you have no time for current events whatsoever, you can skim that and literally know, more than most people about what's going on. And that's the goal. But we do a section called news videos and pick up some of our top videos, we think, from the news media during that period. And one was a commentator on CNN was trying to lead a group of 6 or 8 Americans, sort of a market research group, through what happened in Charlottesville and talk about the official spin falling flat on its face. She's trying to say, oh, white men are bad, nationalists, supremacists, and it's not working. And it's not working with an audience that's, the group of 6 or 8 are diverse. But there's one gorgeous black woman sitting in the front row, and she says, well, it was the white nationalist who killed the protester. And she said, no, it was the police who killed the protester. They stood down. The only reason that happened was the police stood down. I want to know why.
Wow.
And the commentator was like, oh, I guess it's not working. And the spin was not working. It was just, and everybody agreed with the president, including people clearly, because people are grounded. They don't want to see violence, whether it's right-wing violence or left-wing violence. And frankly, in my opinion, all the people doing the violence are being paid.
Yeah.
It's all street theater. It's not real.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And this whole distraction op about Confederate statues. Now, is that part of this attempt to try and tie the Founding Fathers in with that as a way to say, well, the Constitution and the people who put it together, they're not so great, so let's just get rid of it too?
Yeah. So it's very simple. There's a wonderful scene in Gladiator with Russell Crowe plays the gladiator, and he's been captured and he's in the slave quarters, and he's being a gladiator. And one of the other gladiators, they're worried that the emperor is going to try and poison him, and so the food comes in and is tested, and it doesn't have poison in it. And one gladiator turns to Russell Crowe and he says, "Before they kill you, they have to kill your name." So here's what they're up to, because you start with the Confederacy, but then you head back. They're trying to kill the name, and they're trying to kill people's history. It's literally when you destroy people's history and you destroy the artifacts that remind them of their history, you dramatically reduce their individual sovereignty and personal power. So it was very interesting. I always believed in morphogenic fields, but I would never talk about it until after the litigation, because what I discovered is the spooks believe in it because they systematically identified my field and tried to destroy it. And if you have, do you know what a morphogenic field is? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah. And
Right.
that's Rupert Sheldrake's work. I highly recommend it. And that gets into these fields that we create with each other, in a nutshell, through our interactions.
Right. What they're trying to do, people who understand their history are powerful and hard to track. I've got an article up on my website called Living History, and it goes in and explains this. But understanding who you are and where you came from and what your history is gives you an incredible power and the gumption to go, no, we're not doing that. We're going to enforce the Constitution. And if we're not going to enforce it, we certainly don't need to change it.
Right, exactly.
So it gives you that oomph. And, if you look at the thing that most gives me oomph in terms of the ability to act and do, it's what I learned from, my relatives. It's what I learned from my family. I got that training and I got that courage from watching them and seeing them do the same thing. So your field and your family make you powerful. And so anything you can do to destroy people's field and destroy their family and get them instead to resonate with the machine through their little surveillance device, then you've got them controlled. Because before you can do the system that Aaron Rousseau was talking about, before you can affect legal and financial control, you've got to get cultural control. You've got to get control of their minds. And that's why this control issue is so important. And this is why I keep harping on entrainment and the dangers of these technologies. Who's in control of your mind?
Well, it's interesting about these devices because in addition to helping us communicate and shop, they're a one-way ticket, really, to your mind. And some of that tracking technology seems like something that would be more useful to a military contractor and the kind of thing they would use. And it's interesting, speaking of this, because Lockheed Martin recently put out a video about the benefits of a space fence. And we've done extensive reports on the dangers of the space fence here with Alana Freeland and the total surveillance that it represents. And all this reminded me of your past battles with Lockheed.
I sometimes think it's the United States of Lockheed Martin. And I always tell the story of I first bumped into it. Lockheed, when I was there, ran the payment systems at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, both when I was the assistant secretary and then when I was the lead financial advisor. And on repeated times, I would try and get the financial information from the systems, and Lockheed wouldn't get it to me, and I couldn't make them. And you used to think, who's really running this organization? I mean, I know I'm legally liable for its management, but apparently
It's so weird to have a military contractor run HUD's systems. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, but wait a minute. You look at the federal government as though there are 21 agencies. I don't. I look at the government and I see one database managed by a group of defense contractors. That's what I see. That's what I see. I mean, one of the best moments this year, who would have ever thought that Chuck Schumer would be the king of enlightenment? Chuck Schumer was on a Sunday show when Trump first hit, and Trump was being very, bombastic and fighting with everybody. And Schumer said, look, he was talking about the fact that literally in the first 25 days, every phone conversation Trump had with a global leader was leaked to the press.
Right.
Is a massive violation of the law. Massive. But clearly coming from the U.S. intelligence agencies. And, in theory, it could be coming from their corporate contractors. But anyway, so you have Schumer on a Sunday show, and he says to the host, he says, look, Trump's got to learn. You can't buck the CIA. If the intelligence agencies want you to do something, you have to do it. You can't just. And what he was saying is the president works for the intelligence agencies the intelligence agencies don't work for the president. He was discussing our governance structure. He was saying, if he'd gone back since the Kennedy assassination, the victors are now in charge.
Mm-hmm.
So he was basically saying the CIA runs the government, not the president. And the president has to learn that and be obedient.
Amazing. It is an amazing public statement.
Right. I don't think he meant to sort of tee up the core governance, structure issue of our day. But God bless Chuck Schumer, he did it, so I give him credit. And we know who, gives him his marching orders.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Right.
Well, it's interesting. Of course, I just did a segment for HBO Vice for the 54th anniversary of the JFK assassination, and that clip's up at darkjournalist.com. But obviously, there were deep CIA ties to that assassination. But it's interesting to me that if we study that event, we get closer, even closer to the real forces that are running this country.
If you want to understand the American governance structure, you need to read two books. One is The Devil's Chessboard by David Talbot, by far and away the outstanding book on the Kennedy assassination. And it's really supposed to be a biography of Allen Dulles, who was, of course, the project manager. But then I would also read Peter Janey's book, Mary's Mosaic, about the assassination of Kennedy's mistress approximately a year later in Washington. And you read those two books and you really understand what happened, and you really understand why it happened. We had a model, and it was the unipolar model, and Kennedy was moving it to the multipolar model, and it was hiccuping everybody.
Right.
It was hiccuping all the different operations around the system, whether it was the military, whether it's corporations, the oil industry, the steel industry, the banks, everybody. And then you see basically the people running all these systems organize and push back. And one of the reasons it could happen was Allen Dulles had been fired by the CIA and could really work full time from home as the project manager, using people including from the CIA. So it's Talbot absolutely nails the story, and it's a beautifully researched and beautifully written book. If you want to understand America, you have to read that book and then go from there. And here's the reality. The thing that was the most profoundly impacting of the assassination was they got away with it. And the guys who got away with it kind of couldn't believe themselves. They kept pinching themselves. Oh my God, we really got away with it. And once they particularly when they shut Garrison down in New Orleans, they had to kill a lot of people. If you looked at how many people who were assassinated,
yes,
covering up the Kennedy assassination, it's amazing how many people they had to kill. And it shows you the courage of just thousands of Americans trying to do something about it. But then what happened, Daniel, is you started having these progressive financial frauds, and so the people who succeeded at killing Kennedy then rise in the political spectrum, and you have these repeated financial frauds. And if you look at the fraud that they did for the Iran-Contra, the S&L debacle during the 80s, that was quite something. But then they come back and they do it again, layering on derivatives. And then they come back and take the derivatives over to the stock market to do the tech bubble, and come back again to do, the housing bubble par excellence. And then, of course, the whole time money's going missing. And so, basically what they're doing is they're re-engineering the governance structure in the United States on planet Earth by the just do it method. That's what the financial coup, in my opinion, was about. And that's why if we don't do something about it now, then then you're going to be left with all the liabilities in this structure. And whether you're talking about a controlled demolition or implosion, it's scary.
Oh, well, scary is one way to put it, yeah.
We do live in exciting times, Daniel.
Definitely. Control 101 is the new Solari report. This is valuable information and analysis. The report before that, Enforce the Constitution, is just absolutely fascinating, and you can find them at Solari.com. Catherine, of course, your work on the missing trillion sets a standard and snaps the trance from the official story.
Yeah. Math is, that's why I love anything. If I can depend on something that is mathematical, and is affirmed by government documents, then we don't have to debate the facts. Was there one shooter or two shooters? We don't have to debate the facts. The facts are the government refuses to balance its books. It continues to make massive transactions, many times its budget, that are not compliant with the U.S. Constitution, which requires you to be able to prove and document that your spending was in accordance with the appropriations. So the government is clearly not in compliance with the Constitution. It's clearly not in compliance with the financial laws. Can you imagine if every year we refuse to, give the full picture to the IRS and say, well, we have all these undocumented budget adjustments, so we can't really tell you what our revenues and expenses were.
Yes.
For 20 years straight in a row, do you know what the IRS would do?
I can't even imagine. Catherine, outstanding work. And the conversation continues at darkjournalist.com for subscribers. And we'll touch on a few more key areas. It's a great time to subscribe with the discount that you can get now before December 31st. Catherine, it's just great to see you.
It's great to see you, Daniel. You have a great day.
Okay, you too. Thank you for joining me for this fascinating episode with former Assistant Housing Secretary Catherine Austin Fitts on the missing trillions and the shadow space economy. You can find more special reports, deep interviews, and documentaries by going to www.darkjournalist.com. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel to receive the latest videos. See you soon.